Hello, everyone. We're going to wait a few moments and give people time to log on and join us. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. We're still waiting as people join. Okay, we are officially going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Stay at Home Speaker Series. Today's program, which is our first program of the year, is 2021 Migration Season Wrap-Up with David Barber, Hawk Mountain's Senior Research Biologist.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, David. Also joining us are special guests, Hawk Mountain Counters, Dr. Gregory George.
Hi.
And Jeremy Scheibert.
Good evening.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Jamie Dawson, and I'm the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and we are so glad that you all are joining us today. As you may know, Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally around the world. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. To all of our members, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for all of your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, it's okay. We still like you too, but we hope that you consider joining us in the future. Hawk Mountain hopes that everyone remains safe and healthy during these times of COVID challenges. And we are thrilled to have the opportunity to provide free virtual programming to both our local and global communities. Just so everyone's aware, today's program is being recorded, and the video will then be accessible on Hawk Mountain's YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website directly connecting you to our YouTube channel. At any point during today's program, viewers may submit their questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform, and we've designated time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we are so excited that David Barber and special guests, Hawk Mountain Counters, Dr. Gregory George and Jeremy Scheibert are joining us today to share with us summaries and insights from Hawk Mountain's 2021 migration season. And before we go further, I'd like to take a moment to share some of David's background information and experiences with our audience. David holds a Master of Science in Zoology and joined Hawk Mountain in 1999. He is responsible for collecting data in the field, managing our natural history databases, including long-term raptor, bird, and butterfly counts, and for all sanctuary GIS mapping projects. He also conducts stewardship and monitoring programs, helps in conducting the annual count, and trains interns, particularly in wing tagging techniques and the use of mapping software. David is a talented birder by ear and skilled naturalist who can be found out and about working to complete the breeding bird, butterfly, and other annual surveys on the sanctuary. And also, very important as well, David is an award-winning brewer. He is our resident beer connoisseur and enjoys working with his hunting dogs and being outdoors. So David, you are in charge of managing Hawk Mountain's long-term migration counts, including the longest running raptor migration count in the world. What do you find to be the most rewarding aspect of this important responsibility?
So monitoring raptor populations is incredibly difficult because raptors are large, they have large home ranges. So really the best tool that we have to monitor populations is doing counts. And so knowing that the counts that we're doing here help to monitor populations and help to assess the health of these populations and eventually may affect conservation policy of these. Of course, working with dedicated hawk watching volunteers is also awesome. And as a counter, I would say that interacting with the public, seeing the awe on people's faces when they see their first bald eagle is really just incredible.
Oh, I'm sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. So when you're going out to the lookout for a day counting, and you, depending on the month, you have to brave the elements, it could be harsh conditions, and you are straining your eyes to count every single winged creature that passes the lookout. How do you prepare yourself for success for a day like that?
Well, first thing I do is look at the weather forecast. So, depending on the day, always make sure you have plenty of water, plenty of food, plenty of sunblock. And then if it's August, September, make sure you have a hat. Later in the season, make sure you have plenty of clothes, hand warmers, toe warmers. And I always like to carry a psychological layer. So just in case it gets too cold, you always have one more layer to put on. So that, and you just have to be persistent even when birds aren't flying, and have a lot of hope that something is going to pop up any second.
Right, because when you leave to go to the bathroom, that's when something really interesting will go by.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So David is going to share with us highlights from our 2021 migration season. And then after that, our special guests, Dr. Gregory George and Jeremy Scheibert, are going to share with us their personal experiences of officially contributing to the longest running raptor migration count in the world. All right, David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. All right, well, thanks everybody for tuning in for this migration wrap up. I just want to give everybody kind of how the migration season unfolded, what were the highlights, what were the lowlights, and how does this year compare to previous years? Oh. My let's try this again. Oops. All right, here we go, finally. So just to give everybody kind of a brief summary of our count. Our count starts at August 15th and runs through December 15th. We also tend to have a few people that might go up later in the season. So we added another count in December. So for a total of 120 days, we had someone up there counting hawks, often from sunrise to almost sunset. So a total of over 1,100 hours counters spent up on the lookout. We counted 16 species of raptors, which is usually what we get in a season. No special rarities or anything like that. And we counted over 17,000 hawks this year. That was about 6% above average. So anytime we're above average, it's a good year. And we don't only just count raptors, we count basically everything that flies by. So we did end up counting just over 99,000 non-raptors, which included 122 species of other birds, as well as 10 species of butterflies, over 3,000 butterflies, and over 1,100 dragonflies of 3 different species. So these are our conservation winners. So these are all species that were above average counts. Oops. I can go back. Oh, no. Okay, so these are our conservation winners. All species had above average counts. Black vultures had record counts this year. Bald eagles also had record counts. We also had good counts of sharp-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks, American kestrels, broadwing hawks, golden eagles, and peregrine falcons. Now, if we have conservation or migration winners, we also have migration losers, and these are the species that were below average this year. Those included osprey, northern goshawks, which we only had one of this year, turkey vultures, red-tailed hawks, and red-shouldered hawks. Now, I don't want to imply that just because they had a below average year that their population is in trouble. This is just 1 year out of 84 years or however many years we've been counting. So this is just 1 year. It doesn't really mean a whole lot unless we start seeing a long-term trend. And then we had some species that were average. They were not up or down. And those are species like northern harrier, which is actually good news because they're showing long-term population declines, merlins, and rough-legged hawks. Of course, we only average one rough leg a year, so we hit our average this year, which was outstanding. So broadwing hawks are our most numerous migrant. We counted over 8,000 broadwing hawks this year, with our high count of just over 1,500 on September 20th. And this is, and they were above average, 11% above our average this year. And this is a species that migrates in large flocks as they go through, as they go past the lookout. So if we look at kind of our long-term population trends, or long-term counts, you can see it goes up and down a lot. And that's because they're highly variable during their migration. It really depends on what the wind conditions are during the season. And here's a flock of broadwing hawks flying over Duluth. So they move through in a very narrow window of time in September, and they move through in large numbers. And so it really depends on the weather during that time period, whether we see good counts or we have low counts. So during migration this year, we actually had western or easterly winds, which tends to push the birds more towards central Pennsylvania. So these arrows are from different hawk watch sites throughout Pennsylvania. If the arrows are pointing up and they're blue, we had above average counts. And if they had red arrows pointing down, then they had below average counts. And for the most part, most of the birds were kind of pushed towards central Pennsylvania. And these counts that are down in the bottom, Militia Hill and Rose Tree Park, which are outside of Philadelphia, those tended to have low counts. If we had predominantly westerly winds during migration season, these two counts probably would have had the highest counts in Pennsylvania. And interestingly, all of the high counts in Pennsylvania at all these watch sites were mostly either September 19th or September 20th. So we had a huge number of broadwings moving through Pennsylvania around those 2 days.
David, excuse me, can I interrupt you with
Sure.
a question that's relevant to the recent graph you just showed? The
Sure.
question was, and I quote, "What on earth happened in the late 70s?"
Oh, that huge peak. I assume that's what they meant. That is what we call Miracle Day. The conditions were just right. I guess from what I understand, birds were being stacked up kind of north. So we had several days where conditions weren't very good. And then we had one day with southeast winds, which tends to be our best winds during broadwing migration. And literally the skies opened up, and I think they counted over 20,000 birds that day. And it was just nonstop kettles of broadwings, starting about 10 o'clock in the morning and lasting all day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm. So kind of the iconic raptor that we enjoy seeing here at Hawk Mountain are bald eagles. Bald eagles this year were up by 31% over average. The high count of 611 was a new count record. We actually had one day in early September where we counted 43 bald eagles in one day, which is our second highest count ever. And that included 26 bald eagles after 4 o'clock, which is incredible, and nobody expected count numbers like that. But the species is increasing in Pennsylvania. And if we look at all the watch sites across Pennsylvania, every watch site had above average counts. So this is a species that was affected by DDT, and since then, the populations has really skyrocketed. So since the 1980s, these are the counts from North Lookout, and you can see that they've just continued to climb all the way up through the new record in 2021. Now, if we look at, this is a map of bald eagle trends from the Raptor Population Index. And so this shows that all these green arrows show increasing a positive trend in the counts at those sites, and blue dots mean that there's not a significant trend. So you can see throughout the kind of the Northeast, most watch sites are seeing an increase in the population of bald eagles migrating past their sites. So another species that is on the rise are peregrine falcons. We don't see a lot of peregrine falcons at North Lookout. We counted 71 this year, which a lot of people say, well, I can see 71 peregrines in Cape May in a day. But it's a really treat to see an adult peregrine fly through. They were 12% above average. And if you looked at kind of our counts this year compared to last, there was a little bit dip, but it was still the third highest count in Hawk Mountain count history. So another species that since the early 1980s has seen a boom in population and an increase throughout the Northeast. So while we have some conservation or migration winners, we also have some migration losers. Our red-tailed hawk, which is our third most abundant raptor that migrates past North Lookout, was down 35% this year. We counted just over 1,100 of them. The count seemed to be a little late this year. Possibly their peak in November, so possibly warmer temperatures, lack of snow to the north may have affected their numbers moving through. And if we looked at the watch sites throughout Pennsylvania, we see the same sort of trend in that nobody had good counts of red-tailed hawks this year. They were all way down. And here's our graph that shows, again, since probably 1990s, 2000, we've seen a steady decline in the number of red-tailed hawks migrating past North Lookout. There are a couple hypotheses why this might be the case. It's suggested that there are increasing numbers of red tails that are not migrating or not migrating as far. We see more red-tailed hawks on winter bird counts or Christmas bird counts now than we did in the past. And it's also suggested that maybe the northern populations, their populations may be decreasing a little bit as well. And kind of the one surprise, if we look at watch sites across the Northeast, is that a lot of the watch sites are seeing declines in red-tailed hawk populations. And if you think about driving down the highway, you see that raptors sitting on the side of the highway, those are almost always red-tailed hawks. So they're abundant. It's just that the northern populations aren't migrating as much or as far as they used to. Another species that was down and seems to be undergoing long-term population declines are the osprey. We counted just over 300 of them this year, down 7%. When I first started working here at Hawk Mountain, we used to always look forward to osprey parades on those northwest wind days. And I would say in the last 10 years or so that, we're always hoping on those northwest wind days, we're going to get just a steady stream of ospreys moving through, and it just hasn't happened. And it's a little bit mixed as far as the sites in Pennsylvania. Most of them were down, but there were a few watch sites that had above average counts. And again, looking at our data, somewhere starting in the 1990s, they've had this slow kind of steady population decline or decline in the numbers that we're counting at the North Lookout. One of the suggestions has been that with the increase in bald eagle population, that may be pushing osprey out of areas where they were before. And so if we look at, again, the sites throughout the Northeast, there's very few. In fact, there's only one, Cape May down here at the bottom of New Jersey. That is the only site that is showing an actual increase in number of ospreys migrating past their site. And I can't really talk about those species that I've shown an incredible decline without talking about northern goshawks. Our average is about 23 goshawks per year. This year we counted 1, and that is our lowest count in Hawk Mountain history. So down 95% from our 10-year average. And if you look at our graph, you can see that northern goshawks are an eruptive migrant. So they do nest as far south as Maryland, but those populations were never very abundant. And so the birds that we are seeing here at Hawk Mountain are birds that are from further north and are migrating south. And it's usually when their food supply crashes, which are snowshoe hares, that we see really a pulse in the numbers of northern goshawks moving through. I mean, my first year at Hawk Mountain was 1999, which is this little blip right here, and which was the last good eruption of northern goshawks. My first day on the lookout, I counted 16 goshawks, which was, I've never seen 16 goshawks in a day ever since then. And as you can imagine, throughout Pennsylvania, nobody had good goshawk numbers this year. I think the high count was 2 at any of the watch sites. So kind of a depressing result from northern goshawks showing these long-term declines at count sites. But I do want to point out that we don't just count raptors at North Lookout. I mean, one of the really neat things is that if there's not raptors flying, there's usually something else flying. So we count everything. And these are our top 5 non-raptors. American robins, which sometimes move past the lookout late in the day in thousands. Canada geese, which we also, our high day was just over 4,000 this year. Cedar waxwings, which fly past the lookout in small groups almost throughout the migration season. Common grackles and blue jays, which people don't really think about blue jays migrating, but our high blue jay day was somewhere around 1,800 this year. And that was actually a day when there was fog until about 11 o'clock, and you could hear blue jays migrating past, but we couldn't count them. So that 1,800 is certainly an underestimate of the number of birds that went through this year. We also had some unusual birds go past the lookout this year. Sandhill cranes. We had 22 sandhill cranes in 2 different days, late in November. This is, I think, the 11th record for sandhill cranes for the sanctuary, but we've never had that many in a count season. Bonaparte skull, this bird on the upper right. We had a small flock of Bonaparte skulls moving through in November. That was only the 5th record for that species. We had a small flock of black-bellied whistling ducks that flew south past the lookout, was spotted by Bracken Brown, our biologist naturalist. That is the first record of black-bellied whistling ducks for Hawk Mountain. And we also had our first Ross's goose go past the lookout. Luckily, it was flying past in a small skein of Canada geese, and Bill Moses, who took most of the pictures in this presentation, he was able to get a snapshot of it. and we were able to identify it as a Ross's goose and not a snow goose. So there are also lots of other species that are fairly common that migrate through Hawk Mountain as well. Early September, late August, early September, first thing in the day, maybe 2 hours from sunrise is the perfect time to see migrating songbirds. Butterflies you can see just about any time of day. We counted just over 3,000 monarchs this year, and our high monarch day was, I believe, just over 1,200, maybe 1,700. So we did see, that's not right, 800 monarchs in a day. We did see this year. So the species was up this year as compared to last year's. We also had a good number of common nighthawks, this bird in the upper right. We had one day with just over 300 common nighthawks, including a flock of 100, that's a number that hasn't been seen at Hawk Mountain probably in about 20 years, which is great to see that bird. And this bird in the bottom is a male rose-breasted grosbeak, which is a common migrant that moves through early in September. And before this year, I think our high day was somewhere in the low 40s. This year, we actually had a day with 189 grosbeaks going through in small flocks, up to about 30 individuals. And that was followed by another day of 183 grosbeaks moving through. So even though they're common birds, seeing that many in a day is just a special treat here at North Lookout. So I do want to point out that a count cannot be conducted by just a few people. I want to say we had a tremendous staff that did a lot of the counting during the week, and we rely heavily on our volunteers to do the count on the weekends, and we couldn't do it without them. And of course, once all that data comes in, somebody has to enter it and proof it. And I want to thank some of our data volunteers and count assistants here at the bottom. And of course, our conservation science trainees who helped with the count as well. So with that, I will stop sharing. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Cool. You know what, we could answer 2 questions that came in now, and then we can have some sharing from Dr. George and Jeremy. So 2 questions that came up from your presentation, David. We had a tagged black vulture on our property last summer. Can you speak a little bit about your black vulture program?
Sure. We've been tagging black vultures and turkey vultures here at Hawk Mountain for about 18 years now. And one of the reasons why we're tagging black vultures is we're very interested in their movement ecology. We have a feeling that all the evidence suggests that they're non-migratory, but we average, I think, 150, 145 migrating black vultures every year. So one of the questions we want to know is, where are the birds migrating from and where are they migrating to? So putting patagial tags or wing tags on these birds allows us to follow them and use citizen science to do the resighting, and then we can kind of figure out where the birds are moving to. We also use it as a teaching tool. So if we see a tagged black vulture from one of the lookouts, we can speak to their role of scavengers in the environment and the important role that they have to the public. So, but I also want to point out, we are not the only ones who's tagging vultures. Wildlife Services is also tagging vultures in Hershey and West Virginia. So if you see a yellow tag, that's one of our birds. If it's light green or if it's red, that's Wildlife Services.
Awesome, thank you so much. And one more question for now is, do you ever see Hudsonian godwits?
I've seen Hudsonian godwits, but not at North Lookout. We see very few sandpipers or shorebirds moving past the lookout. They're also, the ones we do see tend to be fairly far away and often difficult to identify. So.
Sure. All right, thank you so much. And we'll get back to the questions, the rest of the questions at the end of the program. David, thank you so much for that presentation.
You're
That was
welcome.
really some good information there. All right, so it's time to delve into the minds of some of our awesome volunteer counters and to kind of get a glimpse into what this experience is like for them. So we'll start with Dr. George. So Greg, how did you become involved with Hawk Mountain's migration count?
So for me, my first year volunteering with the sanctuary was in 1994 when I was, I guess, 19 years old. And I started primarily because I was very interested in birds and I wanted to hang out with other like-minded people and learn. And if you want to learn about birds, there's no better place to do it than hang out at Hawk Mountain as much as you possibly can.
Wonderful. So how has being a counter at Hawk Mountain impacted your life?
Oh gosh, yeah. So wow. I guess I owe almost my entire professional career to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. You know, even when those first years volunteering, I worked very closely with Lori Goodrich, and she has helped train me. Her and all the trainees over the years have it's been quite a journey, to say the least. And early on, trying to get those internships when you're in college, having recommendations from Hawk Mountain was always great, but I never kind of let go of that. And right now, I'm the chair of biology for Delaware Valley University. And when I got that job, I still had references from Hawk Mountain on my resume to land my teaching gig at Delaware Valley University. So it's been a career-long friendship and a professional relationship. It's been absolutely fantastic. And now I like to send my students, or encourage my students to go to Hawk Mountain, be interns or be trainees or be volunteers, either way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know I mentioned this in conversation earlier to you, but just so everyone can hear, your name comes up a lot when we're interviewing trainee applicants. So many of them say, oh, I got into birding because I took an ornithology class with Dr. George at Del Val. So that's great that you're continuing that passion for many people. Can you share some of your personal highlights from this past 2021 migration season at Hawk Mountain?
Yeah, so it's always interesting. There's so David's been talking about some of the great numbers we had, and I always like to focus on some of the more individual smaller events that I found intriguing. So sort of like when you're wrapping up the end of the day, you're getting ready to go in, and there's this like one last bird, a really close northern harrier comes right over the lookout. And so some of those like this kind of special moments, Hawk Mountain focuses on the science and the education at North Lookout. And sometimes you have these moments in the evenings or very early morning where you might be the only person on the lookout. And those aren't common moments when you're the only person up there, but every once in a while you are, and something flies by super close, and it's just this more of an unusual event for the sanctuary to be up there by yourself and see some of those things. But there's also other birds, like the songbirds are always really impressive and enjoyable. And this year I had a single group of 200 goldfinches land in the lookout right behind me. And it was just something where I had to look 2 or 3 times to kind of make sure I was seeing what I thought I was seeing, because we get a lot of goldfinches, but we don't tend to get groups that or even get into the over 100, more or less 200 some odd birds in a single group. So there's some interesting things. There's always something interesting can happen at any moment on any day at North Lookout.
Awesome. That's so true. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, Jeremy, are you ready?
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Perfect. Yes. So Jeremy, what path led you to become one of our volunteer counters at Hawk Mountain?
Oh, yeah. So much like Greg has students now coming to to the mountain for the first time. I came as a college student, as an undergraduate several times. And, you know, when I then came to the sanctuary later, on my days off, then I spent my time camped out, you know, right next to the pit with these counters, trying to learn what was happening there. And when I came to the sanctuary, then you know, I knew my hawks by reading Hawks in Flight, and you know, I could maybe tell what a turkey vulture was, but I didn't have a whole lot of experience beyond that. I could tell people I was well read. I could tell people all about how to identify the birds based on having read Hawks in Flight, and you know, the sanctuary asked me to do that, and so I could explain to them, you know, and pontificate in great length on how to do it. I just couldn't actually do it myself. And then in those early years, when I was asked to show people the migration, I can remember that, you know, I really latched onto the osprey, you know, because I could pick that out at a big distance. It's a big bird. I could find it in the sky. It had a really unique profile, so I could pick it out. So my first couple of years there at the sanctuary, I really spent a lot of time, and I had a lot of pride calling out the osprey. You know, oh, you know, there's an osprey. But you know, David and Greg and Laurie and all of the volunteers and regular visitors, they always helped me get things right. And you know, that's what I remember most. You know, Maurice Byrne talking about you know, this kinship and this shared love of wildlife. That's what got me interested in counting, and then eventually they asked me to do that, and so I'm very happy to do that today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So in your experience, Jeremy, what are some of the most rewarding and most challenging aspects of being a counter?
Again, I think the camaraderie that develops in the sanctuary. Some of my best friends have come from the sanctuary's North Lookout, and I'm blessed in having the opportunity over the years to spend a considerable amount of time there. So I think that's one of the most rewarding things is the bonding around wildlife that can happen at a place like Hawk Mountain. I don't know, you know, I can nitpick what some of the challenges are, but, you know, I think that, you know, in any endeavor, you have to suffer through weather that might not be the best, or, you know, I've been slow to embrace the sanctuary's new technology in recent years. I suppose I could whine about that a little bit, but again, I really think the camaraderie and the opportunity to spend an entire day sitting somewhere and observing is quite a special thing, you know. So not just with the birds, but again, so we have this temple that's the North Lookout and the view shed, and then we have this congregation of friends, and then the divine happens, you know. So for me, that's what that experience is all about.
So well said. Thank you so much. So, Jeremy, can you share some of your most memorable experiences from 2021 migration season?
Yeah, you know, I knew you were kind of going to ask that, and I was really drawing a blank as to say, you know, what specifically, because in certain years it can be, you know, certain instances are really remarkable, and Greg had already shared some of those. I don't have any of those specifics. I mean, I guess I would just go back to what David was saying about peregrines. It's always really nice, since we don't get a lot of peregrines. And I usually try to skip off to Cape May so I can get my fill of peregrines. Not that your audience should always just come to Hawk Mountain. But I think seeing some close peregrines this year was really great. The one thing I would bring up when Dave was talking about non-raptor migrants, you know, and my time spent watching hawks at Hawk Mountain, we used to see ravens in pairs. You could always maybe find two in the sky when you heard them. But in recent years, and particularly this year, I saw at least a dozen at one time, if not more. And that seems to be an unusual, it seems to me anyway, to be an unusual phenomenon, at least from years gone by. It seems to be more common now moving forward. But it's really quite interesting, because now when you see a group of corvids, you can no longer just default by numbers that they might be crows, because it might be these what I assume are a couple of family groups or distant family reunion happening, of these ravens. So I think that's pretty much a highlight of this season.
Oh, for sure. Thank you for sharing. And ravens are so intelligent. I was just seeing this article saying some scientist was doing a study comparing their intelligence to that of a great ape. So a lot of respect for the ravens. So, all right. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for sharing all that. And I think we're going to move on to some questions. So thank you, everyone, for the questions. We have some good ones, and keep them coming. All right. So first question, what does it mean to be a data volunteer, and how can one get involved with that?
We have several volunteers that they enter the data. So things like we have our non-raptors, but we also, once that data is entered, we also need someone to proof it. So they'll literally just go line by line, look at our data sheets and look at what was entered and make sure that they are correct. And you can contact myself if you're interested in becoming a data volunteer. It's something that you can do at home, so you don't necessarily have to come to the sanctuary to do it. But we're always looking for volunteers to enter data and proof data.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, David. So this next question, I'm sure, was on many people's minds, is particularly I was thinking when you were talking about red tails. Can you draw any conclusions regarding migration, in particular migration timing with respect to climate change?
Yeah, so we have seen, we had a publication put out by J.F. Tharian, our senior scientist, and we did find that due to global climate change, birds are migrating earlier in the spring and later in the fall. But it was a matter of, I think, maybe a day. So we weren't seeing, drastic changes in migration patterns due to global climate change. But certainly, I think with these red-tailed hawks, the fact that winters are warmer, at least lately, we haven't seen nearly as much snow. If a bird can find access to their food, then why bother migrating? So I think that is probably the case with a lot of these birds with the red tails, is they're just not migrating as far because there's a stable food source that they have access to.
Yeah, not to mention all the roadkill with all our development, right?
Right.
But what a great question. Next question is from Audrey. Hi, Audrey, one of our former trainees. Okay, recently sharp-shinned hawks seem to be in a decline. Is it surprising that they had a higher count this year?
Not necessarily. There's always a lot of year-to-year variation. So again, 1 year can't really tell you a whole lot. It's only these long-term trends that we can get an idea of the health of the population. So it could just be that they had a good breeding season further north. Maybe there was an increase in wood warblers, so their food source. So it's possible that they just had a good breeding year this year.
Thank you. With the stellar sea eagle captivating so many of us, what's the most out of range raptor documented at Hawk Mountain?
There would probably have to be a swallow-tailed kite, a bird that's from the southeastern U.S. And we've seen, I believe, 2 in our history, both within the last 15 years. And that's probably, unless Greg, I can't think of anything more rare than that, or Jeremy.
Cool. Awesome, thank you. All right, now we're going to talk about owls. So the next question is, do owls migrate, and or do you ever see owls migrate? And then can I just actually add on another question kind of related? Do raptors migrate at night was another question.
Okay. Yes, owls do migrate. Not all species of owls migrate. Probably one of the best examples of here in the Northeast are northern saw-whet owls. And I would say we have recorded owls at North Lookout. I've never seen one. I know we've had a short-eared owl once at North Lookout, and I think a long-eared owl as well. But that's been it. And we do occasionally get, we do hear our resident owls, the great horned owl and barred owl, frequently from North Lookout, but those are not migrating. And
Wonderful.
and the other question was?
Do raptors migrate at night?
Right. So some raptors do migrate at night. Ospreys as well as peregrine falcons will sometimes migrate at night, but however, most are diurnal migrants. So they migrate during the day, especially those species that are relying on thermals to migrate. There's obviously no thermals at night, so they're relying just on diurnal migration.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, man, the questions keep coming in. This is great. All right, so this is from a gentleman. I live in Northern California. Is there a comparable location to see migratory birds as Hawk Mountain? Red-tailed hawks are the most prevalent where I live. I don't think they migrate here.
So I think the best known raptor migration site in California is Golden Gate, Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, Bird Observatory near San Francisco. And obviously they get a different flight than we do, lots of Western species. But yeah, I think as far as red tails go, there are resident red tails kind of throughout the United States. There are resident red tails here in Pennsylvania, but I'm sure there's some in California as well. But I think the best place, if you're interested, anybody who's interested in, is there a hawk watch site near me? If you go to the Humana website, is the Hawk Migration Association of North America, humana.org or hawkcount.org. You can look at where watch sites are state by state and see if there's any watch sites near you.
Thank you so much. All right, the next question is kind of like, I saw this bird in my backyard. Could it be this? So some hints, some tips. Okay, I had a small gray hawk around my feeders sporadically about a month ago and at times in the summer. Could it have been a peregrine falcon? It's kind of, without more description,
Sure. I would say that's not very likely. Peregrine falcons are species that nest on cliffs or buildings or bridges and usually hunt birds, but they're not found usually in residential areas during the breeding season. Most likely it was either a sharp-shinned hawk or a Cooper's hawk, both of which are grayish on the back, have reddish barring on the breast. But those are both species that really focus and eat mostly small songbirds. So, and those are typical raptors that you see at your feeders.
Thank you. And speaking of the peregrine falcon in the question, is it true, the rumors that they have been removed from the endangered species list?
They have been delisted in Pennsylvania. Yes.
Great. Thank you. And the next question is from Jerry. Hi. Okay. Goshawks seem to be in a major decline. What research and interventions are taking place to help?
So here in Pennsylvania, they just listed goshawk as, I believe, threatened. So it's interesting in that we're really at the southern edge of the goshawk's range, and most of the population at the southern extent of the range are not doing well. But we really think that part of it could be is that they never were really very abundant in the southern parts of their range. And so without this periodic migration, some of those populations may eventually wink out and they're not being repopulated by potential migrants. They are being listed in several states, Pennsylvania, the most recent one. And that gives them some protection on a state basis. So.
Thank you so much. And I think that's all the questions for now. Thank you to everyone watching. We really appreciate your interest in joining us and such great questions. I did want to share my screen for a second because we have 2 more migration season highlights programs coming up in the next week, kind of following down the corridor. So let me share here. Can you all see that? Okay, so at Hawk Mountain, we always are, we love raptors and we're so concerned about them. And we're looking at the big picture. We're looking at the entire corridors that these raptors are flying when they're migrating. And it's important that, you know, we work with all these different scientists and educators and organizations along these flyways. So if you look at this little map, so David and his team just gave an awesome summary of kind of like the 2021 migration highlights. We're up here in Pennsylvania, and you can see this Eastern Flyway along the corridor. They're coming all the way down here. So next, join us on Monday the 24th at 7 p.m. with our colleagues in Veracruz, Mexico, to hear their 2021 migration season updates. And then we invite you to travel with us, bring your passports, we're heading further south. And then next Thursday, the 27th at 7 p.m., we're also doing a webinar with our colleague Esther Vallejo in Colombia to find out what they've been doing, what birds they've been seeing and the trends they've been seeing over the past 2 years in their count. So join us as we see what's going on along the whole corridor. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who shared tonight. David, thank you so much. Love the graphs. I was taking pictures of them. You might be seeing them on my Facebook later. Jeremy, Greg, thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences. It's just really nice to hear the impact of being a counter for you guys personally. Thank you so much. And you know, I have to promote our upcoming programs for everyone. So as I mentioned, we have our stay-at-home speaker series in January. The 2 more join us on Monday with Kashmir Wolf from River of Raptors, Veracruz, and Pro Natura to hear their migration updates. And then on the next Thursday, the 27th, with Esther in Colombia. And then we have 2 stay-at-home speaker series in February, and they're both focused on snowy owls. So that will be popular. You'll want to see that. Other exciting news is that we are launching our Winter Artisan Series for this year, starting in February, and we partner with the local Arts Barn. And every weekend, starting from February all the way throughout the end of March, and even going a little bit into April, we are partnering with the Arts Barn and offering a variety of different art programs taught by all local Pennsylvania artists. And by participating in these programs, you're also supporting raptor conservation. So check that out. Our first one is on February 5th, paper quilling. And then we have on February 12th, coffee painting. Check out our website for more details. We have Scouts BSA Trail Days coming up the weekend of February 5th and 6th. Register your Scout group before January 28th and save 50% on trail fees. And then Boilo is pretty awesome. And if you're from Schuylkill County, you know what Boilo is. So on February 6th, we're having a cultural Boilo, the coal miner's cure. So that will be a fun one. And very popular owl prowls coming up in mid-February, February 12th. And then we have Wild Love, a new program on Valentine's Day weekend on the 13th. That will be a good one. So we hope to see you on the mountain soon. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you for supporting Hawk Mountain. Bye for now.